Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Brandywine School District Board of Education regular meeting on Monday, September 20th, 2021. Tonight, we are located live in the BHS auditorium as well as via Zoom. Ms. Karpinski, may I please have a roll call?
Mr. Scrobot.
Here.
Ms. Pigeon. Here. Mr. Ackerman.
Here.
Ms. Gordon.
Here.
Mr. Heller.
Here.
Reverend Perry.
Here.
Ms. Stock.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask Mr. Ralph Ackerman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we proceed, I wanted to make an amendment to the agenda, moving item 10A, format of future board meetings, from new business to old business, which would make it item 9B. This was something we had discussed in previous meetings, so I just wanted to move that item from new business to old business. And with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, first up this evening, we have special presentations. I would like to welcome Dr. Cohen to recognize Brandywine School District's very own Ken Hutchins. Hutchins, sorry.
Good evening, board members and Mr. Holler. It is my pleasure tonight to help recognize someone from our curriculum and instruction department that not only advocates for the use of data, but who also helps others use and understand the data on the service of our students. I would like at this time to call Ken Hutchins to the podium. And we can't thank you enough for your work and service to our staff and students. It's our pleasure to hear of all the wonderful work that you do, not only for our district, but in the entire state with your colleagues in a similar role in their own districts. You're a true leader in advocating the appropriate use of data to help guide decision-making in and around our district and our state, quite frankly. At this time, I would like to introduce to the board Dr. Chris Cohan, the Director of Accountability and Co-Chair, or Director of Accountability for Newark Charter School, Director of Accountability and Co-Chair of the Delaware Education Data Forum, and Dr. Adrian Peoples from the Department of Education, to recognize Ken formally as the Data Forum LEA member of the year 2021.
Good evening, and thank you for having us here tonight. I wanted to give a brief introduction of what the Delaware Data Forum is. The Delaware Education Data Forum was formed 6 years ago to bring the state education agency and local education agencies together to work collaboratively to provide clarity, confidence, and consensus on the best possible student level data and the ways that that's used in our education system statewide, in the Brandywine School District, and in the surrounding local education entities. Ken is one of the two co-founders of the Delaware Education Data Forum. He's been involved in this group since the very beginning. He served as the first LEA co-chair of the committee. We now are made up of over 40 LEAs statewide, all of the public school districts, most of the charter schools, pretty much any school agency that is out there is represented at the table, partnering with the state to really share and work together with our best practices in the use of data. One of the best examples I can give of what Ken brings to this organization is at our most recent meeting last week. We had a new member from downstate who moved into a position similar to Ken's in one of the large public districts who was looking for help. It's a unique position that Ken is in this district. There's one of him in every one of these districts. And it's largely a job that goes unrecognized, and it's important to the functioning of all of our schools. Immediately, Ken stepped forward and volunteered, said, I'll contact this person on my own. I'll help them get their feet on the ground, learn the steps that they need to take, the people that they need to know, and what they need to do to be successful in their job. Ken doesn't get recognized for this. He doesn't get rewarded for this. He does it because it is good for the profession, it's good for students, and it's good for education in Delaware. So that's one example. There's numerous of these that I could give that Ken has taken on in this organization. He was elected by his peers overwhelmingly to be recognized as our LEA Data Employee of the Year. So I want to turn it over to Dr. Peoples from the State Department of Education with a couple of words to say about Ken as one of our founding members.
Superintendent Holder, esteemed Brandywine School District Board members, my name is Dr. Adrian Peoples. I work at the Delaware Department of Education. It is my pleasure to stand before you tonight and present Ken Hutchins with this award that recognizes his hard work and data. Ken is a product of the Delaware Public Education System, having graduated from Lake Forest High School in 1985. He raised two children, Jordan and Taylor, also products of Delaware Public Education. With nearly 30 years of service in Delaware Public Schools, he has been a teacher, a team lead, a department chair, a building administrator, and a district administrator. He's worked above the canal and below the canal. He has worked for a large traditional school district, as well as a startup charter school. He believes that good decisions come from accurate and actionable data. He spends countless hours compiling, analyzing, visualizing, and explaining data to both his constituents, his peers, and unfortunately, me, late nights on the phone. Whether it's at district-wide administrator retreats in the summer or one-on-one tutorials over coffee in his kitchen, he is a nerd and wouldn't have it any other way. Finally, as the first LEA co-chair and co-founder for the Delaware Education Data Forum, he has served as a strong voice, not only for good data practice, but for building strong relationships between the LEAs and the State Department. Under his leadership and contribution, the forum is not only the most successful data cadre in the past 20 years, its membership is asked to participate early and often in key state level decisions that have data at its core. Brandywine School District, it is my opinion that you employ the best data professional in all of Delaware public education. I'm proud to work with him, and it is my honor to present Ken Hutchins with the 2021 Delaware Education Data Forum LEA Data Professional of the Year.
And on behalf of the Brandywine School District, we just want to say how appreciative and proud we are to have you here with us. Thank you.
Superintendent Holo, board members, to be recognized by your peers is truly an honor, but I can't accept this just on my behalf. All the support that I get from C&I, from the superintendent, Cora, all the executive team, all my principals, other supervisors. You know, I do this to support them, but most importantly, support kids and hopefully make better decisions looking at the data. But this award is also because of all my friends and my family here at Brandywine School District.
Thank you, Ken, for all you do for the Brandywine School District. And like you said, to be recognized by your peers is an outstanding honor. So congratulations to you and continue to make us proud.
I too would just like to say thank you, Ken. And I knew Ken before I knew Ken because his reputation as a data guru long preceded my formal introduction to him. So we are thrilled to have him as a member of the Brandywine School District.
Great. Next up, I would like to welcome Ms. Gianna Rivera Morales to help Brandywine School District celebrate Spanish Heritage Month with a proclamation.
Good evening, buenas tardes. Declaración del mes de la herencia hispana 2021, 15 de septiembre al 15 de octubre. Es con gran entusiasmo que el Distrito Escolar de Brandywine reconoce y celebra el mes de la herencia hispana. El mes de la herencia hispana tiene una historia propia. En 1968, el Congreso autorizó al presidente Lyndon B. Johnson a proclamar la semana del 15 de septiembre como Semana Nacional de la Herencia Hispana. En 1988, la observancia se amplió a una celebración de un mes de duración. Es la única celebración que comienza a mediados de mes. La celebración reconoce a los latinos que son conocidos por sus diversas culturas que abrazan la familia, la comida, la música y la danza. La fecha fue elegida como marco del aniversario de independencia de 5 países latinoamericanos: Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras y Nicaragua. México y Chile también celebran sus días de independencia el 16 de septiembre y el 18 de septiembre, respectivamente. Hay 16 países de habla hispana en el mundo: Argentina, Chile, Cuba, República Dominicana, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Perú, Uruguay, Bolivia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Honduras, Panamá, Puerto Rico, Venezuela y España. Delaware alberga una población del 8.2% de ascendencia hispana. Como superintendente del Distrito Escolar de Brandywine, es un placer reconocer el mes de la herencia hispana en nombre del Distrito Escolar de Brandywine.
Gracias.
I would like to say gracias, Señorita Rivera Morales, because I was supposed to read that in Spanish, and you stepped in and saved me. So thank you.
And that leads us next to Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Cora Scott, and Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Michelle Kutch, to present on continuity of learning plan.
Good evening, President Scrobot, members of the school board. Thank you for having us this evening to share some information related to our continuity of learning plan. We're going to go through a few pieces of information, and Dr. Kutch is going to assist me with that. So the CDC and the Department of Public Health have stressed that students attending in-person learning is the recommended approach. However, for various reasons that may be unique to individual students, there may be a need for an alternate approach to ensure that there is continuity of learning. We have created a learning continuity plan for our students that are quarantined or isolated due to COVID, as well as for students who may be identified as having COVID-like symptoms. So these students are unable to attend in-person learning for a period of time that is determined by our lead nurse. Consultation is always maintained with our Department of Public Health liaison on student situations. The amount of time can vary depending on the circumstances and the details determined through the contact tracing process. Students may be in and out of in-person learning in a fluid manner. And so our continuity of learning plan supports students so that they can continue their learning while they are being required to learn from home. And students must return to in-person learning based on the return to school date that is established by our school nurse.
So for those students, the K-1 students will be out for just a day or two due to having COVID-like symptoms. And for grade 2 through 12 students, we are providing the opportunity to audit their classes during the time they're out. Auditing classroom instruction for a student is not a full interactive experience. The teacher would have their camera turned on, but only facing the teacher or the instructional resources such as a whiteboard, smartboard, charts, etc. The camera would not necessarily be facing other students. This would allow those students to listen to the instruction in real time with their classmates. They can access the resources that are posted in Schoology to continue their learning and complete assignments. The teacher would check in on students to provide support as the lesson permits. Students' attendance will be marked as remote. This does not count as an absence, but instead ensures that we are tracking the learning location for the students on a daily basis. For our K-1 students who will be out for longer periods of time due to isolation or quarantine, we have a different plan. We developed a model for our K-1 students who will be out for longer periods of time. It'll provide support knowing that they may need additional help based on their level of independence because there are littlest learners besides pre-K. Members of the Curriculum and Instruction Department are providing live instruction, synchronous, for the K-1 students who are quarantined or isolated. For example, our coordinator of ELA provides literacy instruction for our students, and we have asked our C&I team to pull together in creating a schedule to ensure that the learning continues for our youngest students. Having C&I provide this instruction ensures that there's alignment with our curricular expectations and will follow for ease of transitioning back into in-person learning, as Cora mentioned before. Additionally, the C&I team, district administrators, will be included in the rotation to provide a read aloud opportunity for our students. This has been a lot of fun, I have to tell you. Again, students' attendance will be marked as remote. This does not count as an absence, but again, ensures that we're tracking their learning location on a daily basis. Our unique learners, we do recognize that for some of these students, there may be a need for additional supports, particularly for our students with disabilities. Individual arrangements are being made for those students to ensure that they receive their special education and related services. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Thank you, Dr. Kutch. Questions or comments from the board?
Yes, I have some questions. Thank you so much for this presentation, and I just want to thank you for having the foresight to think about the continuity of services. So I'm really, really appreciative of this as an educator. I just have a couple of questions. So for these plans, especially like the short-term kind of auditing inside into the classroom, was there like a table of stakeholders that helped to come up with this plan?
So we shared the information and talked with our administrators, as well as discussed it with our union leadership around what we were thinking would be in the best interest of the students, given the fluidity of things, and trying to just make sure that students in those situations are able to continue learning. So we did discuss it with various groups.
Thank you so much. My second question is, as far as for the long term for the younger students, what would happen if there would be too many students in that long term? Because, and I really appreciate that the services were provided by the curriculum instruction team. Is there a plan for if indeed there would be too many students for the curriculum instruction team to handle?
So at this time, we're monitoring the numbers closely. I think that's something that I know Superintendent Holler is going to share some data updates, and that's the piece that we've got to just watch closely. Right now, the numbers are relatively small. Michelle, I'm not sure if you know exactly. It's probably 10 kids or so.
It ebbs and flows. So 15 on some days. We had 19 once. Today we had 3. So it all depends on the situation.
And just one more question, thank you so much. As far as unique learners, I know that the special ed students will be included in that. What about English learners?
So that's something that Michelle and her team, Suhaili Solana, our English language learner, our coordinator, they'll look at individual kids and determine what might be some additional needs and try to put supports in place as necessary.
Thank you so much.
And I just have a simple question. So, to be honest, I'm not up to date on how in sync classes are. So if a first grade student at one school's math lesson, is it so in sync with a first grade student at a different school that this remote instruction is going to definitely align? So I guess I'm asking, how do we ensure that what they're learning remotely isn't material that they've already learned or that's too far ahead from where they are in their class at that time?
Sure. So if you're referring to the K1, is
Yeah.
that, sure.
Well,
So,
all, but yes.
well, for the other grades for 2 through 12, they will be auditing. So they'll be actually in the actual classroom of the teacher as is. So really for that question, I would say that the portion that CNI has been instructing those students, we in CNI have created the pacing guides with the teachers for this year. So, to your point, could it be off a day or two, but overall for that portion of time, it would pretty much be very close.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank
Thank you,
you.
Dr. Coach. Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Superintendent Holler with some general news and updates for the superintendent's report.
Good evening, board, audience, staff, and community members here in person, as well as those joining us virtually this evening. First and foremost, how wonderful it is to see our students back where they belong, in our schools. As of today, enrollment stands at 10,561, but that number will change over the course of the next 2 weeks as we pick up late enrollments and remove some no-show students from our rosters. We believe that we should come in slightly above last year's enrollment of 10,405 students. This little guy is walking into preschool for the first time at the Joseph Brumskilled Early Childhood Assistance Program, ECAP for short. You gotta love it when the book bag is as big as the student. But don't blink, because before you know it, he'll be scoring touchdown passes on the gridiron in high school. It's great to see our students returning to school, excited, walking through the door, ready to learn despite the distractions in the world around them. Yes, things are different, but they are adapting to the learning the new parameters that COVID continues to impose. Sometimes that means seating arrangements that are much different than what they're used to, not just in the library, but having to sit in the hallway at Springer for lunch. Not just Springer, but in a lot of our schools, the gymnasiums, hallways, even lobbies of the schools are being used during lunchtime to ensure adequate social distancing to the best of our ability. Even if you're in the cafeteria, you might see signs on the table where middle school students, very unaccustomed to having assigned seating at lunch, now have assigned seats to aid us in contact tracing purposes. From elementary to middle to high school, we're making the needed adjustments, including students in our site co-op program who are going to work every day, practicing skills necessary to be productive in the world of work, of upon graduation from the program. Students, just like those you see in the middle of Tally's immersion program, the first year for that to expand into middle school, and we're excited about that. And all the extracurricular activities that we have going on. To see students back in school, engaged in activities that they love, that they enjoy, brings a much welcome sigh of relief, not only to educators, but to parents as well. Happened to be at the Concord football game, the Brandywine football game, and I don't know who was having more fun, whether it was the athletes on the field or the band members in the stands, because they were having a ball. And the parents were smiling as much as the students were. And that's all great to see. But there have been some challenges along the way. These are pictures from our own community. Students and families who live in this section of the city that was hit severely as Hurricane Ida tore through their community, flooding the banks of the local rivers. This is actual footage of an area where our students live, and I have to commend fellow board member, Reverend Shanika Perry, who from day one, minute one, was on the scene providing much needed support and rescue and relief as much as could be to those families in need. Here you see the water lines along the side of those houses, and many of those homes, those 4 or 5 blocks that we happened to be at that day, had basements. And these people lost everything in their basements, everything in the first floor, carted out to the curb. And I have to thank Colleen Carter and members of her school nutrition team and the transportation department, who on a moment's notice dropped everything, the plans that they had for an evening, and came together to quickly provide sustenance and wonderful food arrangements for many of those people who had nothing. No pots, no pans, no way to preserve the food, no way to cook the food in a moment's notice. In addition, we also had staff members. These are staff members from Concord High School, I believe, who went to the stricken community to aid and assist in the cleanup activities. Much of those activities are still ongoing. So just a tremendous response to afflicted community members and communities that are right here coming to Brandywine schools. And it's great for us to reach back and serve those in need. This is an interesting picture. Those of you who have high school students, especially seniors, you may not believe this, but yes, Brandywine High School had something called Senior Sunrise. Somehow they convinced seniors to get out of bed before the sun came up in the morning. So on the first day of school, there were quite a few students assembled out in the football field, enjoying the opportunity to be back with friends and people that they had not seen. Again, welcoming that sense of somewhat normal return to school activities. When we talk about the value of social, emotional wellness with our students, we know that being in person is key to that relationship building. So, Mr. Roth, whatever that secret sauce was that you used to get seniors out of bed, you might have some parents following up with you after tonight's meeting to get that recipe. Very well done. So students are back. And we are thrilled that they're back. And we just celebrated at the beginning of this meeting, Ken Hutchins' focus on data. And we have said all along as a district, we will focus on data. We will track that COVID data and do our due diligence to stay ahead of it and try to put things in place in response as proactively as we possibly can. So just showing you the data from new cases over a 7-day period for 4 states: New Jersey, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. So when you think of us regionally, those 4 states or 3 states come to mind, and here's Delaware in the purple. We are the highest. We are actually, as of last Friday, didn't check today, but 26th in the nation in terms of number of new cases per 100,000 on a 14-day trend. So it's important to keep gauged where we are compared to our sister states. But it's also important to take a look at where we stand in terms of other states nationally. So in this graph, it's the same 4 states: Maryland at the bottom, New Jersey in the blue, followed by Pennsylvania in the orange, and here's Delaware, and here's West Virginia. Not too far away, but you can see the spike that they have compared to where we are. Here's another graph. Took West Virginia out and put in South Carolina, and you can see considerably different rate of spread in other states. Again, Delaware right now, 26. So we're right there, average for the US. Dug back a little bit, and what this graph shows is the range of ages and the number of cases, and you can see the jurisdiction is for Delaware. And this shows back to January 9th of 2021, kind of like the height of the spread, and when we return students after winter break, students back into our schools. This graph is the same breakdown of ages, but it shows where we are as of the 4th of September. There's usually a 2-week lag in that data. That's why we can't show you 9/15 or 9/20. That was the most recent they had as of last Friday. And I know that's hard to see, so we kind of put it into a little table here. For the 0 to 4 age group, you can see there were 319.8 cases per 100,000. And that was, again, last January. If we compare that to the 4th of September, you can see we're at 316. So about 3 cases under. So that age group is much different compared to the other ones, where we are about at half. When you look at our 16 to 17-year-olds, back in January, about 800 cases. Right now, about 400. So we're about halfway, much different with the 0 to 4. So we're trying to keep track of what that spread looks like in the state. Newcastle County has the least spread in terms of the 3 counties compared to Sussex and Kent. But we're also the most compact when you think of density in terms of the number of people per square mile. All those pieces come into play. And this is the big one. So board members, you'll recognize this chart. This is the same chart that I put in every week to you in your Friday packets, but it shows the progression of the 7-day average of new cases per 100,000 for the 3 counties. You can see Newcastle County in July was at 14 cases. We're now at 281, up considerably since the beginning of school. Kent at 367, Sussex at 366. The other set of data we constantly look at is what is that positivity rate, the percent of tests that are coming back positive. You can see again, Newcastle County is lower than its sister counties, but if you look at that progression, you don't have to be a math guy to see that trend. It's continuing. And that's what's got us nervous as we continue to look forward. National experts have been saying for several months that they predict that this current spike that we're seeing with the Delta variant will peak around mid-October. So with that in mind, we have to keep our eye on this data. So I'll share, I didn't put them on a slide, but I'll share just a little bit of data around our isolations. So I broke them down into high school, middle school, and elementary school. On average, we have 2 isolations per day at the high school level. That means it is a confirmed positive case of COVID. Not 2 per building, 2 across all 3 high schools on average since the school year started. At middle school, we have 1.8 cases per day across our 3 middle schools. And at elementary school, we have 3.2 cases per day. Quarantines, a little bit different. So quarantine students, they're exposed to someone who was a positive. That means they were considered a close contact. And by DPH definition, a close contact is someone who is within 3 feet of a positive individual, masked or unmasked, for a total of 15 minutes or more cumulatively in a 24-hour period. So if we look at high school quarantines, on average, we are quarantining 1.7 students per day. Middle school, 2.8. And at elementary, 17.8. Again, 1.7 at high school, middle school 2.8, elementary at 17.8. Why such a big difference? Well, with the Delaware Department of Public Health, if a student is vaccinated and they are considered to be a close contact and they are vaccinated, they do not need to quarantine. They still need to monitor their health, but they don't need to quarantine. If that student is unvaccinated, they are subject to quarantine. At the elementary level, obviously, we don't have vaccines currently available, so those students are not vaccinated, and then DPH requires them to be vaccinated. Now, in that 17.8, there were a few instances where bus was involved or eating in the cafeteria where a seating chart had not yet been established, forcing all the students in that class to be quarantined. So we are being very careful to watch this data. But if this trend continues, we are going to have to think of something different, as I believe it was Ms. Stock who asked, or maybe it was Mr. Heller, what would happen if a larger number of students had to be quarantined? How would we handle that? So at this point in time, we are I'm nervous, I'm concerned about the data trend. We'll continue to monitor that trend. And at some point down the road, we may have to think differently, especially at elementary school, our approach towards keeping those numbers low and adding additional, what they call mitigation strategy to what we've already employed. And that would probably involve some type of cohorting. Don't know what that is yet. Don't know what it would look like. We've had some preliminary planning sessions, but again, trying to be absolutely transparent, Mr. Skrobot. We will continue to look at that data, but again, concerned about the trend line we see there. With that, we're going to move forward a little bit. And again, I want to thank Senorita Rivera Morales for her assistance tonight in bringing attention to the value and culture that our Hispanic community brings to Brandywine School District. And I wanted to be very clear with the audience tonight. This presentation was going to be delivered at the last board meeting, but unfortunately that board meeting was postponed. So it gives us an opportunity to look at this and consider this evening. Over the course of the past several months, there's been some critics claiming that we are proponents in teaching the critical race theory. We have adamantly stated that we are not teaching the critical race theory, that we do have what we call a very strong equity program and focus on equity. That has come under question and fire by some members of the community. And tonight I want to be clear on what the Brandywine School District means when it talks about its equity initiative and focus on equity. To do that, we decided to put together some kind of like, this is what we believe statements. And I'm going to share them tonight. And this is not new to the Brandywine School District. I've been in this district for 30 years, and I can unequivocally state that this has been a focus of the Brandywine School District, and it will continue to be a focus of the Brandywine School District. So members of the board, please indulge me while I kind of read through this we believe around our equity work. We believe all children can learn. We believe in educating the whole child. It means academics, social, and emotional wellness. We believe every child is unique, coming to us with differing abilities, strengths, and areas of need. We believe to effectively teach children, we must seek to understand who they are, their backgrounds, and their experiences. We believe our mission is to address the unique learning, emotional, and social needs of each student while extending and accelerating their strengths. We believe that a one-size-fits-all approach falls short in meeting the needs of today's students. We believe that one's culture has a profound impact on daily life and experiences. We believe that one's perception of the world is grounded in life experiences. We believe one's experiences naturally create personal, I'm sorry for the spelling error, personal assumptions, explicit and implicit biases, and often stereotypes. We believe, especially as educators, that we have the responsibility to seek and understand how our own perspectives and beliefs vary from those of the culture of the children and families of the community we serve. We believe that all people, you and me, everyone in this room, have the responsibility to seek and understand how our own perspectives and beliefs vary from those of our neighbor. Part of that work that we pursue in terms of equity is understanding where our families, where our students are coming from. I can't pretend to know the experience that others in a different culture have had, have lived with, or suffered with in terms of my existence and what I experienced growing up and my norms and behavior. What I think is typical may not be typical to someone else sitting here in this room. And as an educator, if we're going to reach the mind, we have to go through the heart. We have to understand our kids. We have to know our clientele. We've got to examine our practices. What are we doing consciously? And equally important, if not more important, what are those subconscious actions that I might do that keeps a child or a group from the same opportunity that they deserve, that their peers have access to? Equity work does involve discussion around race, absolutely. It also involves discussion around ability and disability, demographics, socioeconomic status. All those pieces come into play. We are not promoting a critical race theory agenda. I saw posts from an individual who FOIA'd information from the district around things that we have used to deepen our own personal understanding of the existences and life experiences of others. I've already gotten an email on how dare you. You read white fragility. You doggone right I did. How am I supposed to understand the perspective of others, a perspective that I have not lived? It's by reading and educating myself. And that's what we're in the business of doing in the Brandywine School District. Doing so causes one to feel and experience discomfort. It requires you to open your mind and realize that there are things that you don't know and you don't understand, and you need to listen to understand. Not hear, you need to listen to understand. Our kids deserve that. Our kids do need to hear Black Lives Matter. That does not mean that we are subscribing to or promoting the political organization of Black Lives Matter. But it means that the kids I serve understand that I do value them, that I come to work every single day on their behalf so that they have all the opportunities that I can absolutely provide them, to give them every advantage of meeting their hopes, their dreams, not just today, but in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years down the road. All kids need to know that they are loved and they are cared for. We do not promote, indoctrinate political agendas, ideologies. Are political discussions held? Yes, they are in the classroom. And they're held in classes that kind of discussion belongs in that classroom. Civics, social studies, and they are monitored discussions. I've told you 2 meetings ago that do we have educators who go across the line? We do, and we have to reel them back in. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that doesn't happen. But when it comes to our attention, we do bring it to their attention, right? And we do monitor. We need to make it crystal clear that if we're going to be in the business of educating kids, we need to understand our clientele if we're going to do our due diligence and truly serve each and every individual child that walks through the doors of our building. With that, Mr. President, I can tell you that I am proud to be BSD.
Superintendent Holler. I just want to take a minute here to reflect on your comments before we get into responses from the board. There's not much that I can or want to add to that. I think you said it succinctly. I thank you for your statements that you and the team have put together for what we believe in the district, and the description of the community that we serve at large. So I don't want to step on your message, because I think it was outstanding. I do want to touch on your earlier point, some of the concerns with the numbers at the elementary level and thinking outside of the box. I'd like you and the executive team for the next meeting to kind of, continue to pursue that and see what options, what that looks like if and when elementary numbers continue to grow. Through Ms. Scott and Dr. Kutch's presentation and some of the way elementary students are auditing classes. I think there's some missed opportunities there that as those numbers, if they continue to grow, we need to think of some alternative options to deliver that education. And I don't know what that looks like, whether that is, giving consideration to elementary hybrid, to the room and Zoom model for those areas that are, the operations of a school are really coming into question. So I would like to, charge you and the admin team to continue that and bring some ideas back, through the weekly Friday packets and also for next meeting. Will do. Any other comments from the board regarding superintendent's report?
Just to say thank you, Superintendent. Thank you.
I'd like to also, I think Superintendent Holler was, he thanked everyone, but I guess he can't thank himself, but I'd like to stand to thank not only Superintendent Holler, but a host of community organizations who stepped up to the plate to assist our families on the northeast side of Wilmington throughout the Hurricane Ida ordeal. The truth of the matter is, on that particular Friday evening, the families were without food. And if it weren't for Superintendent Holler, the nutrition staff and the transportation staff, those families would not have, probably would not have had meals that evening. So I do want to officially go on record, since he gets beat up so much, and say thank you for your leadership, but also to the entire district who, whatever role you played in supporting the families who were impacted. And finally, I want to thank you for your comments, and I echo what our superintendent, and I'm sure many of you do as well.
Mr. Scrobat, before we move on, can I just add to that the cost of feeding the individuals that evening was not borne by the district. It's being picked up by an outside party.
Right, that's outstanding. Thank you for making that clarification. And thank you to the outside party that has made that possible.
I just want to say, Superintendent Holler, thank you for your message of equity. And as someone who was born in this community, raised in this community, raising my children in this community, and as a member of this board. It reminds me of the reason why I chose to join the board, to run for election for the board. And I thank you for that message of unity.
All right, moving on to public comment. Before we start that, so over the last, well, later in the agenda, we have a continuation of the format for our future board meetings, which will address how we are going to conduct public comment going forward. And over the last couple of months, as kind of the volume of public comment has increased, tried to manage that best we can, and we've made some changes and trying to do that. So kind of tonight's, I think the website might have advertised tonight's meeting as 2 minutes per speaker, but our cards do still say 3 minutes. So I'm not sure, Ms. Scott or Ms. Karpinski, who's running the clock. So I'd like to make sure that we give speakers the 3 minutes. And as usual, you know, in order to run a productive meeting, it's imperative that we stick to that time. Please be mindful of the clock. It'll be posted. Microphones will end at the 3-minute mark. It's not personal. Just want to be fair and consistent. We ask that everyone, you know, hopefully we can have a respectful, civil comment session, and everybody will get their time to speak, as this is the public's time to be heard. We do not have any Zoom comments this evening, so we will start in the room, and we will start the lectern microphone is over there to my left, and just ask you to state your name if you are a resident of the district, and the time will begin when you begin to speak. So first up, we have Paul Falkowski with James Ingrazia on deck. Ingrazia.
Thank you very much. I came in here with a different idea what I was going to do, thought about it for the last couple of weeks, thought I'd had something to say. I listened to your presentation. Congratulations on all the work that you've got to do. I'm deeply impressed by all your efforts of making sure about COVID. I'll try to be as brief as I can. I'd like to teach. I'm the math teacher who showed up 2 months ago. But answering your questions here, I'm 100% inner city, born and raised Browntown, Hedgeville. My ancestry is Polish. My grandparents got here in 1901. So there's not a whole lot of past history that we did one way or another. I am not privileged. And in one respect, I'd like to put it out, I also need to be understood. All right. I don't know if there's any books about the Polish growing up in Browntown, but you know, I'd be happy to share that with you. I'm still available as a math teacher. I'm white and I'm not fragile either. I'm 72. I've got some military background and a few other things, you know, but I pay attention to what's going on. I thought about applying 2 months ago and I basically hesitated, and I'm going to finish it with this way. Like I said, I've listened to everything you guys are talking about. I was going to give a little bit different speech here, talk about what we need to do is what you guys have measured, and what you can measure is your mathematics scores. And that's what I'm mostly interested in. And math is basically a pure subject. It's not like civics and history and everything else. So again, I'm applying. I'd like to teach. My certificate works for 2 more years. However, the hesitation came from this, and I'll just leave that as my final remark. Basically, I was worried that if I applied, that I would be entering a hostile work environment by everything else that it was presented in different ways. And it might be not fair to say that, but I was worried about it because of all the criticism that people that look like me put up with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Falkowski. Next up, James, forgive me on the last name, Ingrazia. And we'll have Jay Hetler on deck.
Brandywine School District teaching critical race theory. The board denies they are. We've heard speakers stand here and say critical race theory is not being taught in Brandywine School District, nor being taught widely in this country. And stating this, these people have displayed their ignorance of what is actually included in CRT or of what is being taught to our children, our teachers, and administrators. I say to you, what do you consider critical race theory? Call it what you may, but it is politically motivated Marxist indoctrination. CRT is a grievance ideology grounded in the Marxist idea of class conflict, dividing people by rich versus poor. But that would fail due to America's mobility in class. Only in America do you hear stories of someone starting out in the bottom and through hard work and determination, achieving success. I admire those people. We now have teachers prepping students for a predetermined failure. Take your failure as a lesson, learn from it, and move on. Instead, critical race theory zeroes in on something that cannot be changed, the color of one's skin. People are segregated into two groups, white and non-white, and that a person's race represents the sum of their capabilities. There is a common glossary of words used by CRT, which each in itself actually sounds euphemistic. Such terms are equity, social justice, diversity and inclusion, systemic opportunity gap, and culturally responsive teaching, hidden under the guise of SEL, social emotional learning. Based on documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, it can be definitively stated that our kids' teachers are being taught elements of CRT. Last year, the Brandywine School District hired Markia Davis to fill a newly created position called Supervisor of Equity and Culture. Markia Davis is also an AVID District Director. Based on the structural presentations included in the FOIA documents, this district supports less discipline and lowering standards specifically for minorities, as well as culturally relevant pedagogy, which states to recognize students as valuable contributors to the classroom space as opposed to social, cultural, and academic burdens. How the hell is this not offensive? All the kids are capable if you give them the means. People who identify as multiracial increased by 276% from 9 million in 2010 to 33.8 million in 2020. What do you say to those children? We also know Brandywine School District spent over $15,000 in 2020 to contract Panorama Education to conduct SEL and equity and inclusion surveys. Panorama Education received major funding from Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. These documents also include a proposal for revised American history, including colonization and social change. There is also a discussion guide for educators on the book White Fragility to discuss things as their racism and white supremacy. Why is it that an educator who sacrificed their lunch break to tutor a child is doing so because of guilt? Yet an educator that does not deduct points for improper grammar is helping through equity. There is a disparity in poor communities, predominantly minority.
Thank you, Mr. Ingrazio.
Just as a great conversation with this man will not help. The problem is that
We would really like to give everybody the opportunity to speak at 3 minutes. We would really like to give everybody the opportunity, their 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Jay Hetler with Tanya Hetler on deck.
Thank you. And I am a member of the district. Jay Hetler is my name. The vast majority of the finances to run our Brandywine schools, as you know, comes from our local taxes and our state taxes. So it's a good idea once in a while to see if we are getting our money's worth. Starting in 2019, the amount they spent each year, the Brandywine School District, increased year over year by 7 million, then 10.5 million more in 2020, then increased another $6 million of our tax dollars in 2021. We are now at more than $17,000 per student. Our district spends almost 8% more than the national average per student yearly. So how are we doing? Well, US News and World Report gives the dismal news of only 54% of high school students in our district are proficient in reading, 54%. And only 38% are proficient in math. And these outcomes aren't getting any better. So what does work? Well, according to studies by National Public Radio and the National PTA, the most correlated factors for success were parent participation, teacher to student ratios, and teacher salaries. Not extra administrative positions, not focusing on race and gender issues. Let me repeat, the most correlated factors for success were parent participation, teacher to student ratios, and teacher salaries. However, according to Brandywine's own Freedom of Information Act disclosures, our district will spend nearly $500,000. I repeat, $500,000 of our tax dollars and countless hours over 2 years focusing on social justice, ideology, and equity, including over $80,000 already spent on outside training organizations. Yet these show no correlation of outcome. Yes, we should continue to provide extra support and attention, both money and time, and understand all students, just like you said, who need to be brought up to the math and reading standards. But we should put these resources where they have been proven to work, with programs for increased parental participation, smaller student-to-teacher ratios, and increased teacher salaries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hetler. Next up, we have Tanya Hetler with Maureen McGurk on deck.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I want to tell you all about a teacher training that was offered, actually the date of the last school board meeting, August 16th, that was titled Black Lives Matter in School, and that focused on the 3 principles of Black Lives Matter. One of the videos in the training states, what would schooling look like for Black students if they didn't have to walk in straight, quiet lines like prisoners? What would schooling look like if we centered the well-being of Black students instead of school codes of conduct? I think these statements are offensive and racist. Are they saying that Black students are not capable of walking in straight, quiet lines? Are they saying that Black students are not capable of following a code of conduct? Black students are perfectly capable of following rules for the safety and order of a school. Additionally, they are not being treated differently from white students. All students are required to follow the same rules for the safety and well-being of themselves and others. Third, comparing order in a school to a jail is not helpful for anyone, Black or white. What would they recommend instead of walking quietly in lines in elementary school, or instead of having a code of conduct? The description of this training states that it will show teachers how to teach the whole child with these principles in mind. We will challenge educators to center Black lives in their classrooms. Twice in this training, we see the idea of centering school on Black students. Does this mean that we do not center the school on Hispanic students, Asian students, or white students? What exactly does it mean to center schools on Black lives? If you have not had a chance to look at the 13 principles of Black Lives Matter, I would suggest that you do so, as some of them are concerning. Many of them are given positive labels such as Black families, but when you read further, you find that what they are actually doing is discouraging the existence of the traditional family. Another of these principles is collective value, which is the opposite of valuing the individual. This is why Black Lives Matter and social justice ideology view everyone according to groups, Black or white, male or female, gay or straight, and try to split people along these lines. Once you look into the 13 principles of Black Lives Matter, you'll be able to judge for yourself whether you would like to see them taught to your children as is being proposed in our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hetler. Dr. Hetler. Maureen McGurk with Carol Burke on deck.
Good evening. My name is Maureen McGurk. I'm an elementary teacher in BSD, and I'm just here to express my gratitude and support for the professional development on equity that has been provided by Markia Davis and Yolanda McKinney. I can tell you that the sessions and work groups I've attended so far have been some of the most relevant and useful PD I've received in my 25 years of teaching. I hope BSD will continue this commitment so more educators and leaders will have the opportunity to participate. I can't tell you how many times I think of Superintendent Holler's words last year about the importance of educators modeling the act of being learners themselves. We know that the best learning occurs when we get out of our comfort zones and are willing to take risks in gathering new information and applying new understanding and skills to our practice. And this applies to more than just new curriculum and technology skills. Teacher, educator, and author Zaretta Hammond says that in order to be culturally responsive, teachers must understand the socio-political context that impacts their students and communities. This is very different from promoting one's own personal political views. So we need to understand that broader, we need to encourage that broader understanding by continuing our commitment to equity work. It's critical to be able to make these decisions in the best interest of all of our students, families, and community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McGurk. Carol Berg, and forgive me on the last name, with Kim Tull on deck.
Hello, my name is Carol Burge. I'm a retired pediatric nurse and child and family counselor. Social justice ideology separates us on the basis of race, color, and gender, while at the same time promoting fear in our children. Fear controls. Fear creates division. It moves us further from the truth. Fear silences a child's individuality, identity, and uniqueness. Fear creates division along social justice ideology categories, and fear increases disciplinary action or disciplinary issues. Social justice ideology violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This law makes the following illegal: segregating students in any capacity based on social justice ideology, for example, race and gender. 2, using social justice ideology when grading homework. 3, applying discipline based on social justice ideology. 4, forcing students to admit, accept, affirm, or support an aspect of social justice ideology as part of its training, exercises, and/or assignments. Instead of implementing social justice ideology, school boards and teachers need to assess all curriculums and teaching materials and teaching methods that undermine both our U.S. Constitution and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Teaching social justice ideology in K through 12 schools has been declared illegal in 9 states due to the fact that it ignores both the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, which was written to ensure that freed Blacks would be treated fairly and equally, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The same should be true in Delaware and in the Brandywine School District. Promoting social justice ideology in our schools goes against anything our country was founded on and everything that we've always believed about how people should be treated fairly and equally. Both our founding fathers and Reverend King risked their lives because of the importance of this statement. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We need to once again value the truth of the equality of humankind as our founders did and as Reverend King did. And we need to return to these truths and teach them to our children.
Thank you, Ms. Berg. Next up, we have Kim Tull with Eric Bronstein on deck.
Hello, this is my first school board meeting, and I had one child graduate from this district, and I have another one in this school right now. We actually choiced our way into this district because we felt it was the best district in Newcastle County. Thank you, yes. I just came out tonight to support the board and to thank you for all the steps you have taken to ensure that my child is going to be safe in this school. She stayed home all year last year, because we were nervous and afraid, and she has some anxiety, and it was just a very difficult thing to get her back in school. She is thriving, being back here now and doing very well and feeling very comfortable and safe. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your equity statement as well. That's all I need to say.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. Next up, we have Eric Braunstein with Don Wood on deck.
Mr. Superintendent, I listened to your very kind words. What in this binder is the webpage printout of the anti-racism resources for all ages section of the diversity and equity resources for families section in the Brandywine School Board's website. We brought it to the board's attention 2 months ago, and we were promised that it would be reviewed. It still remains apparently untouched as of today. I would ask everyone to go home tonight to have a look at it. It's 42 pages. To the best of my knowledge, there is not one reference to any of the great Americans who helped steer us to what we are today, with all of our faults, the most inclusive civic society in history. Any objective observer would have to label the extensive reading list as classic, postmodernist, neo-Marxist indoctrination, and I choose those words carefully. This is academically wrong, emotionally wrong, intellectually wrong. And this is what is being offered to the parents and students on the PSD website. We are asking you for a standard of informed intellectual ideas which can be shared with our students and their parents, not ideologically motivated indoctrination. I turn to the audience tonight and ask, where do we go from here? What can we do? What can we do with the Delaware State Education Association? This webpage was surely composed by its members, or at the very least by paid consultants, paid with our tax dollars and concurrent with the DSEA's objectives. And let it be noted that a member of the DSEA is on this board. Where do we go? Do we go to our local to our state legislators, all of whom are members of the majority party that is deeply influenced by the DSEA? Are we going to have to pressure our legislators to run a bill that would allow voters a greater say in our education? Nobody wants that. Mr. Superintendent, as you offered, did you review these web pages, and do you plan on making any changes? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braunstein. Next up, we have Don Wood with James Hanby on deck.
Kind of lost. I came in, I thought somewhat prepared, but some of the stuff I've heard, my family has over 85 years of teaching in this district, close to 90 years of coaching. I've been blessed with Pan American gold medalists, 2 Olympians. I'm connected with 8 state championships. My wife was coach of the year 4 times in swimming and 2 times in tennis, and never played tennis. And some of the conversation, I like to come back to school. I'm in and out of schools a lot. I don't get it, but I will say this. Link Holler, he was in tears one time when I had a first chance to meet him, almost. And he mentioned football tonight. He was a Yellow Jacket at Newark, and he played for the legendary coach Butch Simpson. And when you went over your presentation, I'm just absorbing the importance of athletics and strengthening our facilities, the 21st century facilities. That's why I was going to ask the board if they ever went down to Abacino Stadium. And they don't have to answer it. I saw one of the pictures. That's why I came, because I'm the old bulldog that just keeps pushing for that. I graduated from here in '61, so I am old. November 10th, the Delaware Sports Hall of Fame is inducting a coach from Concord. Who is that? How many know Coach K? Raise your hand if you know Coach K. He illustrates everything that I'm talking about. Leadership, teamwork, get knocked down 5 times, get up 6, be responsible. He had over 90 kids out for his program, and it didn't matter whether you're 3rd or 4th string. Holler understands that. And when I'm sitting there and listening to you today, Dr. Holler, excuse me, I'm thrilled. One of my wrestlers from Concord coached a guy by the name of Holiday. I think he demonstrated leadership and teamwork and trying to help the public. I could go on. Our kids, one of my administrators here, I'm in and out of the building, I won't say who it was, said, don't you think our kids are just as worthy as having 21st century athletic facilities as our neighbors? Yeah, it's going to cost us a little bit of money, and I think the board already supports that. And I've gone back with them before to the last election, or the last when the taxpayers had to pay it. It's important. It will strengthen our schools. It strengthens kids. I'll go past my 2 minutes. I graduated 20th from the bottom of my class at Brandywine, and I never forgot my coaches and what they did for me.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. We're at time. Appreciate it. Next up, James Hamby with Robert Anderson on deck. Richard Anderson.
Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Holler, I'd like to also recognize my friends, our senators from up in Brandywine 100 here, Senator Sturgeon and Senator Gay, who are with us tonight here to listen to their community. I had not intended to speak tonight, but Alan Benton was here and was going to speak and had to attend to a family emergency, so he asked me to sit in for him. He printed this, and I'll paraphrase Washington by saying, I have grown old in your service and my eyesight have grown dim. I would have printed this in much bigger font. A group of concerned residents of Brandywine School District were disturbed by some of the allegations that we observed in our district. There was a letter that was presented to this board a couple of months ago, and we were concerned about what was in that letter. We want the board to know that we stand behind the comments that Superintendent Holler made in the past, and certainly what he said tonight here. Critical race theory is not being taught. The board and the administration does not have a Marxist agenda, and that they're not pushing personal and political agendas by the district teachers. We support the free speech of anyone who wishes to petition their elected board members on whatever topic they would deem important. And while we feel that the recent controversy is a manufactured one, we choose not to sit by quietly while others defame the district and specific members of the board. In our opinion, this matter was thoroughly litigated in the board election in May, where one candidate pushed theories and false claims regarding things that are not part of our curriculum, and it's not being taught in our district. In this election, by a margin of 72%, the other candidate won. The residents of Brandywine 100 have spoken. We support the district's efforts in the areas of diversity and inclusion. We support broad conversation by members of the administration, teachers, and students in favor of examining race relations and solutions for a better understanding of different viewpoints. We support the board rising above the noise and focusing on the task of educating the children of the Brandywine School District, providing opportunities to learn in a safe, caring, and respectful environment, just as is stated in the district's mission statement. I believe you all have received a copy of our letter. To date, over 500 residents of the Brandywine School District have signed that letter in support of the Brandywine School Board. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hamby. Last speaker of the evening, Richard Anderson.
Good evening.
I'm going to speak up so everybody can hear me. First of all, I was here 2 months ago and asked the board to resign if they were going to teach or bring in CRT into our school district. Everything that I heard tonight says it's here and you sugarcoat it. I look at the resources that the teachers have been given, and I don't see anything on STEM, on education. All I see is ideology. And I'm going to be honest with you, if you can't tell how divisive it is just in this room, it's unbelievable. You got your teachers who believe in this, obviously, and you got parents that don't. I'm a grandparent, and I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to keep an eye on my grandkids, and would, like this gentleman said, who do I take it to? I don't trust you guys. Do I take it to the Parent-Teacher Association? Do I take it? Where do I take it? That's the problem. So it's some of these teachers, I'm sure, will cross the line in good-hearted way, but it's not what the parents want to see their kids taught. My kid is Jewish. My grandson is Jewish. Now, you want to make him an oppressor after, now, you know what? It just doesn't fit. And I think you ought to reconsider your list, because I'm going to tell you, 1619 project, that's garbage. I want to see real civics taught. Every kid deserves an education, okay? But they don't need to be instructed on ideology from a woke government that is tearing this country apart. So I'm going to show up at every one of these just to see how this progresses. This is, you've opened the door crack on CRT, and now we'll see how it goes. So if you can tell me if we are not happy with the way a teacher has approached our kids with this, who do we go to? Who do we go to that they're going to listen? Again, my name is Richard Anderson. I've been in this district 40-some years. Both my daughter graduated from here. My son didn't do so well here. He went to Delaware Military Academy, which brings me to my last sentence. You got to learn how to set up discipline and apply it evenly to all kids, so that if they mess up, and all kids do, that they are disciplined the same way, so that they're not feeling picked on. I'm running out of time, but that's how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. That concludes our public comment session. As always, any comments from the board? I guess just a couple things. I know we've kind of been down this road the last couple of months. The superintendent laid out our, what we believe is a district for equity and inclusion and what that means. So I'm not sure where the disconnect is. Certainly resources posted on our website are not curriculum. They're resources for our family. Couple of things we heard, U.S. News and World Report, and I think that same U.S. News and World Report also ranked Mount Pleasant High School as the #1 comprehensive high school in the state, if I'm not mistaken. Concord was in the top 10, and I believe BHS was in the top 12. Certainly some of the financial numbers taken out of context is a look of what our entire budget is for our district, where money is spent. So just to, I don't think pulling out isolated numbers paints a full picture. So I guess asking, question was raised, what do we do? Where do we raise questions and concerns? Like always, I think if you have a question or a concern about your child's education, you start with the teacher, send an email, make a phone call, ask the questions, raise the concerns. If you're not satisfied with that answer, go to the school principal. If you're not satisfied with the school principal, take it to the director of elementary or secondary education. There is always a path. And as a district, I think our superintendent, and I know my relationships that I've, have with different building administrators, we're accountable. We're a public school. We have public meetings. There are email chains. You have to ask the questions, and you will get answers. They may not always be the answers that you like, but there is a path to be heard. And I hope that all of our administrators, whether they be at district office or in the individual buildings, I hope that they're, giving an explanation when they're providing answers to questions and concerns and offering solutions. And, if it's a situation where you can't come to an understanding or if it's not the outcome you're looking for, then maybe you can at least get some understanding. But my experience, I know that our teachers and administrators want our students to learn. They want them to do well. They want them to succeed, and they will listen, to your concerns and make every effort that they can to resolve them. And I think I've said this in past meetings, we hear a lot of concerns about non-specifics. So if you see something in your class that you're not happy with and you're not getting the resolution, the board members' addresses are posted on our website. Let us know if you've exhausted all your, all your outlets and you're not getting it. But I'd like to hear some specific objections, because I'm hearing things that we've presented tonight, what the superintendent presented, and what we're doing in our schools. And we've shared that over the last several months of what is going on in our schools and what is not going on in our schools. And then we come to a school board meeting and I hear concerns, but there's no specifics to what those concerns are and where this is, being taught in the classroom. So I would say, please, if you have these examples, bring it to our attention and we will investigate, answer, get you an answer to the questions that you need. So anybody else from the board has anything on?
Mr. President, I would just add that in addition to perhaps talking to the teachers and to everybody else, go ahead and talk to your students too. Talk to your kids. Ask them, what are you learning? What is it like to go to school with people who may not think like you or look like you or act like you or come from the same type of neighborhood that you do? So don't forget to talk to your students too.
And I think to the earlier comments about, equity and inclusion, and, we have people here tonight who you're at a board meeting. I applaud you for that. These are some of the biggest crowds that we've seen in years. But the population of students that we're serving, and this is beyond race. This is, a combination of race, geography, socioeconomic, all the things that Superintendent Holler mentioned. And one of the biggest things is, schools, children are coming into schools, and that is their one safe haven where they need to feel loved and believed in. And that's not specific to any race. And that's why all those we believe statements, I don't think anything mentioned race in those statements. It was all about the students and what we do for all of our students. And different students do need different things. And our we believe statements satisfy that. And that's where we're coming from. So thank you. All right, board liaison reports. Delaware School Boards Association Executive Board, Mr. Ackerman.
The executive board was scheduled to meet on September 1st, but due to Hurricane Ida, we postponed that meeting by a week and moved it back to the 8th. We had a quorum. In fact, it was quite well attended. We had a guest speaker, Dr. Lawson from our district, came to give us an update on special ed due process. It might shock the public to know that there is a law firm in the state that has gotten over $2 million of state money, while families have received virtually nothing in return for that money. It's a very unfortunate situation. We continued till we had our treasurer's report, all the committee reports. We talked about the disabled veterans tax credit, which is on our agenda for this evening. That's something that boards must take action on. Our next meeting will be November 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Delaware School Boards Association Legislative Committee, Ms. Gordon.
Yes, the Legislative Committee has not met yet. We will be meeting on October 6th, but I did attend the executive session with Mr. Ackerman. And I must say that Dr. Lawson's presentation was outstanding. And I don't mean just for those folks from Brandywine School District. She spoke to people throughout the state. And Lisa, it was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. District Finance Committee. District Finance Committee held its monthly meeting on Wednesday, or no, actually we were Monday this month, September 13th. We reviewed August monthly financial report, financial position report, as well as the disabled veterans property tax credit, which we will talk about later. And we will talk about all of those items when Dr. Hale presents them. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 13th. Parent Council for Students with Disabilities, Ms. Pigeon.
We have not met since our last meeting, but I believe we have a meeting on Wednesday of this week.
Parents and Citizen Advisory Committee, Reverend Perry.
There are no updates from the Parent and Citizen Advisory Committee.
Health Advisory Committee, Mr. Heller.
Actually, we skipped Maintenance Advisory. Can I jump back to that? I have that report up.
I'm sorry, what?
Maintenance Advisory, if we jump back to that, that's the report I have.
Oh, I'm sorry, we did skip Maintenance Advisory.
So for Maintenance Advisory, we met on August 24th at Mount Pleasant Elementary. The committee walked through all the summer work that was completed, including the beautiful remodel of the main entry area, and talked about all the summer work for all 16 buildings. And then we had a pretty high-level discussion on long-term projects and planning needs across the district, that it would include future capital referendum needs to allow the district to maintain our current standard of excellent facilities. And our next meeting is October 5th at Mount Pleasant High School.
Okay, thank you. And can we roll to Health Advisory Committee?
Yeah, 1 second. The Health Advisory Committee met on September 15th. The committee is working on monthly themes to educate students and their families about health-related issues. September is Start with Hello. October is Bullying Prevention. The committee is also working on a mental health screener for 10th grade students in all 3 high schools. This is a project that's still being worked on, but there's a hope to have a pilot in one of the schools ready for November. The committee also discussed the importance of House Bill 100 that was passed this summer, which adds mental health staff to elementary schools. We're hopeful that BSD will get 3 mental health professionals from that bill. And finally, the nurses have written a grant for the Future of Nursing campaign that helps promote nursing careers in middle schools to help promote the nursing field. The next meeting of the Health Advisory Committee is Wednesday, November 17th.
Thank you, Mr. Heller. 91.7 WMPH. We did not have a formal meeting since the last board meeting, but I do think there was an update that I did not communicate. The advisory committee is working on the renewal of the contract with Delaware Public Media. That contract will be presented to the board hopefully next month. Anticipation, minor changes, which we can discuss and hopefully move forward with that relationship. No new meeting is scheduled prior to that. So look for the coming weeks in the board docs, a draft of the revised contract once it has passed legal. Educator recruitment and retention, Ms. Stock.
Yes, I am thrilled to announce that the Brandywine School District is having a new committee dedicated to the recruitment and retention of educators for the Brandywine School District. It's probably not a secret that we are facing a real teacher shortage. Just for example, when I look today, there are probably over 100 vacancies across the state of Delaware. So this is a true problem that affects really everybody in this room. So a couple of weeks ago, I did meet with the Director of Human Services, Delethea McIntyre, to brainstorm on some ideas. We're looking for educators, parents, students, and community members to join us on this effort. And more information will be coming soon. And I would also just like to say that I have spent the last couple of weeks meeting with some principals in their elementary buildings, as well as a principal of the Bush School. And I've just been so impressed and just a wonderful welcome and just thrilled to see everything that we're doing in Brandywine School District. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stock. Perhaps I think Mr. Heller with the nursing recruitment efforts, stay in touch with Ms. Stock, and Ms. Stock do the same for that, any overlap there from teachers and nursing. Additional board member reports, comments? All right, hearing none. Thank you everyone for your reports. That will move us on to, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I cannot vote on the consent agenda items A through E. There is no board minutes attached to be reviewed. They're not in board docs. The change orders are there, but the minutes are not. I don't know how we can vote on minutes that are not present.
Let's see.
I have them.
Anyone else not see them there?
I have them.
You do?
Yeah.
Are they attached on your?
Yeah.
Is it where it says view minutes?
I did not see a little piece of paper next to my
Maybe refresh
minutes.
your login.
Okay, if I go there, I can see it. Okay, never mind. It's a link.
Okay, are we good? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Personnel matters. Do I have a motion to approve the monthly personnel report as discussed in, I don't think we had a report. We just had items. Is that correct? We didn't have an actual personnel report, correct?
Yeah, we did.
It's listed.
Is this 7A?
It's listed. Yeah.
Hang on. There it is. I see it. I'm sorry. Do I have a motion to approve the monthly personnel report as discussed in exec session?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Student matters. Do I have a motion to approve student matters as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moves us on to old business. Item A, Superintendent Huller, you share us an update on the proposed gift of 44 acres at the former Brandywine Country Club site to the Brandywine School District.
Mr. Scrubba, can I just interrupt? I misspoke during my board report. Can I just correct that date?
Sure.
Okay. I had said that the meeting was coming up next week. It's October 7th for meeting dates for parent orientation. And due to family emergency, I missed the past meeting. So I just want to correct the record. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Thank you for correcting. All right, Superintendent Huller, update on the proposed gift of 44 acres to the Brandywine School District on the former Brandywine Country Club site.
This will be brief, Mr. President. I'd just like to say thank you, first of all, to all the parents, community members who were ready last week to give public comment at the Planning Board meeting, Newcastle County Planning Board. We were told that at that time, that was the appropriate time for public comment to be made in support of the land donation that Mr. Capano has so generously offered the district. The chairperson of the meeting kind of decided otherwise and said that it was not the appropriate time to have a discussion around the dedication or donation of that 44-acre parcel. We have learned that public comment will still be open, not the verbal public comment in front of the planning board, but we will be reaching out to parents, community members, staff members who live in the community, who have the best interest of the children at heart in this community. Not saying that That came out wrong. Let me reverse that. Everybody has the best interest of children. I would put that in positive intent, but have the desire to see that land donation go to the school district for current needs and future needs. So parents, please be on the lookout for an email coming your way. Community members, we will post information in the next couple of days in the yellow box on the district website of the address and to whom you should send your public comment on that project. We desperately need the planning board to hear from you, to show your support, our collective support in the donation of that land. And again, I'd just like to say thank you to Mr. Capano for his generosity in thinking about the school district and our current and future needs in that donation.
Thank you, Superintendent Holler. I just wanted to add to that. I mean, you know, I tuned into the planning board meeting last week, and just, you know, for those who are not aware, this is a unprecedented gift for our district, you know, here in North Wilmington. This is not like Appoquinimink or down lower Newcastle County, where land is often donated through, you know, developments of neighborhoods in order to build schools. And, you know, this is unprecedented for our district, and we are extremely grateful. So any support, you know, you can provide is helpful. But we're also sensitive to the needs of the community that immediately surrounds it, and, you know, some of the concerns about traffic and development. And, you know, we just want to echo our sentiment that, you know, look at our properties throughout the Brandywine School District, how we've maintained them, you know, largely due in part to the vision of Mr. John Reed. You know, we will continue to be good neighbors and sensitive to the needs, and we will, you know, if traffic was one of the concerns we had heard, we've, you know, outlined in previous board meetings here, you know, ways that we can mitigate that with any future school. And this parcel would allow for, you know, extensive open use of our facilities, you know, to the public that they're accustomed to on all of our district properties. So thank you. Anyone else comments?
Maybe just to add, besides the land donation being unprecedented, it's also unprecedented to have 100% of the funding covered by the state bond bill, so there's no local impact.
For a specially dedicated special school such as Bush, yes, I agree. All right, so we moved on the agenda. Format of future board meetings is old business 9B. So we'll kind of open the discussion, kind of we've talked about in the beginning on, given the nature of virtual meetings, live public meetings, how as a board do we want to conduct our meetings going forward? You know, I don't know that it needs to be a formal policy. Our current board policy, you know, certainly if we want to tweak that, we can. But it talks about, you know, generally having a 30-minute, well, first off, I should say, having our board meetings in person. Senate Bill 94 with Senate Amendment 1 was the document that kind of outlined physical meetings versus virtual meetings and participation of boards. And it would be my intention that we, you know, certainly encourage live in-person meetings, absent of state of emergency as the bill outlines, but not to hold virtual meetings unless we're under a state of emergency. I think it's good that we would broadcast our meetings via Zoom or YouTube to maintain our transparency and, you know, allow the community to view our meetings remotely to get the necessary information that they need. Personally, I believe the interaction and the public comment should be reserved for live and in person. I understand that's not always an option for all of our families, given the, you know, demands on our time with children and activities and jobs. But that would be my direction to go moving forward.
Mr. President, I think, one of the things that the legislation does is it gives you flexibility as the presiding officer to kind of make those calls as you need to. If we do not amend our policy, which does talk about 30 minutes periods of public comment, though I think we've never actually held to that 30 minutes, I think it lends itself to leave it to your discretion, and I'm certainly comfortable leaving it to your discretion as to whether or not, we continue with a hybrid type format where the public is allowed to attend virtually, or we should go back to 100% in person. But I do agree that board members absent a public health emergency should be present at the board meeting.
Yeah, I think so too. Outside of, the ADA accommodations, I think a lot of what the policy or kind of what we've come accustomed to over the last couple of years, if someone's on vacation, we should allow them to be on vacation and not necessarily dial in from wherever they may be. I think the way the legislation is written, if you do open up your meeting to allow board members to participate remotely, then you should have your public can participate remotely. And I would, I would like to, keep our meetings live, in person, going forward, and aside from whatever accommodations would be necessary per the legislation.
I think it's difficult to say that we are a district who is inclusive, but at the same time, we're not taking into consideration those who may not be able to participate in person. You didn't name parents and families, but those that may have limited transportation, I think that it would behoove us to make a small accommodation so that they can participate if necessary virtually.
I would have to second what Reverend Perry says as well, that because we are a district that values equity and, giving people an opportunity where perhaps they would not have had that to be able to participate virtually, to be able to make comments virtually is something that only a person could do if they just didn't have transportation, which is somebody who works with families who often do not have transportation. The virtual format of different school events that we've done has helped greatly.
I appreciate those comments. Just trying to think in terms of managing the meetings going forward. Tonight we certainly had, a fair share of comments. I think we had 11 or 12. Certainly manageable. I think going forward, if we're going to open it up to live speakers and Zoom or live public comment and Zoom public comment, then I'd like to kind of maybe stay more true to a defined time of public comment. That means 30 minutes to an hour. I know, Mr. Ackerman, you had mentioned that current policy allows for some discretion in running the meetings. And ideally, what I'd like to kind of get back to the consistency and have a good expectation for the public that, I know over the last couple of months, probably since the beginning of COVID, once we started doing Zoom meetings, just trying to manage the volume of public speakers, given what the topic was, trying to find a happy medium that the community can have an expectation that they know and that it's not going to change from week to week. I think that just creates some of the confusion and inconsistencies. So, if it's the will of the board, I would be open to, continuing with Zoom and live comments. Whether that means the time frame is, kind of set to whether it be the 30 minutes, general 30 minutes of the current policy with discretion to move it to an hour. But I guess we always have the option to hear a motion to continue whatever the topics may be and to allow all the time.
I have two thoughts. One is I think listening to Reverend Perry, this is probably a longer discussion for a permanent solution. So maybe we should add this to a future retreat topic and actually revise the board policy around meetings together where we have more time to talk about it. And then I share your concern a little bit about public comment virtually because I think we're pretty sure over the past year we've had numbers of public commenters that not only weren't residents of the district, which they don't need to be, but I don't think we're even residents of the state. So maybe something we can look at in a future workshop is how we can format public comment so that at least we know that it's stakeholders that are sharing their concerns and not a larger group.
There are boards in this state that do not take public comment from people who do not live in the district. We had this discussion at the DSBA Executive Board meeting recently. I wholeheartedly agree with what you just said. People should disclose their names, addresses, potentially phone numbers, and we should verify that they are indeed district residents.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's not fair. I think especially if we limit time, if there's folks that aren't our stakeholders that are commenting, it takes time away from those that are. But I don't know if that's something we can decide tonight. So maybe we could just have that on a future workshop agenda.
Yeah, I think the way I don't know if it's code or law, but the legal advice that I had obtained indicated that the code or law is written for citizens of the state, and that it could be a slippery slope if you start trying to define residents of the district. That you may have employees that are not residents of the district but would like to be heard in a public comment session. I think certainly we have our public comment cards that we could maybe tighten up some protocols on as far as, they need to be complete and full with the information that's requested in order to make the public comment. Zoom's a little more challenging, which is part of my hesitancy to continue with Zoom public comments. But I do, appreciate Reverend Perry and Ms. Stock's comments about being transparent and being open. Certainly families have the opportunity to email the board to express their concerns on topics related to the agenda. But I guess I'm just trying to find something going forward in the near term that we can kind of be consistent with, if it's the short term, as we work on a longer, whether it's a policy revision or a deeper conversation at a retreat or a workshop.
So Mr. Scarba, are you looking for a motion to continue with the live format and the Zoom?
This is not an action item on the agenda.
It is just a discussion item this evening. Correct, just a discussion item. So I guess not being an action item, then I will continue to use discretion and try to, appeal to the community that we will continue to try to, certainly when we post the agenda 10 days in advance, that the instructions for public comment will be on there. I would think in the near term, I'll continue to act according to the existing policy. We'll do written comment cards, whether we revise them or not, and Zoom comments with the discretion to limit the time as needed.
Mr. Scriven, could I make a suggestion in terms of signing up for public comment, if that's the path forward? Perhaps everyone signs up online. That way it's time and date stamped, so we know the order in which people signed up. Those who are attending in person, we can have some iPads out in the lobby. That's how they can sign up instead of just writing out the card. And that way there's a fair distribution between call-ins virtually and people in person.
I think that's fair.
Also, Mr. Holler, maybe in the future we could also look at putting, and this could be something of the discussion that we have later at another time, but we could look at putting emails or whatever comes into the board as a public comment online. So we can, just as individuals who would read their public comment here would be heard by members of the public, emails or letters that are meant for the board would also be put into record for public comment.
How would we decipher those who want their letter to be shared versus those who do not?
Well, that would be, right, I would think that it would be at the permission of, or at the intent of the person who's submitting it.
Yeah, I would be hesitant to reading emails as part of the record. We get emails from time to time as board members on a variety of topics. But you're saying through the direct public comments sign up?
No, just as how other organizations do their public meetings, just like the land use meeting, where they have a link where people can submit their public comment as a public link. So
we make it a part of the record, but not necessarily read it as part of the record?
Right, just
Okay.
that it would be available for public comment or for public viewing.
And then the verbal comments would only be on the video replay, but not transcribed to the written. That's something to think about. Okay.
I also would like to add to the discussion, when I first introduced this particular topic, it wasn't virtual versus non-virtual. It's more about the misinformation that goes, that is left on public record and not addressed. And so I'd like to see us also add that into the discussion on how we consistently and not wait too much to address the misinformation that is given.
I don't know how in real time that we would be fact checking all public commenters. I think that opens the door. I don't know. I think there's, Mr. Holden.
We have a new PIO coming on board. Alexis Andrianopoulos left us at the end of June. It's taken us 2 months to find the perfect candidate. We do have that candidate now, starting October 4th. So perhaps we get her involved in this process and use her as a resource to figure out all the nuances of how to move forward.
Okay. All right, so that will, Reverend Perry, that will get added to the discussion, I guess, whether it's, forming some sort of PR response if, some significantly incorrect information appears to be distributed or mentioned or raises questions within the community. We can certainly, offer somewhat of a response, much as we do, in real time as a board after superintendent's report, public comments, and so forth.
Thank you.
Any additional comments on the format of future board meetings? All right, hearing none. We'll move on to COVID leave extension. Superintendent Huller, do you want to kind of touch on this or?
Sure. And Dr. Hale is going to jump in as well.
Oh, okay.
Last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, we received a memo from the state of Delaware, the Office of Management and Budget, informing us that districts should form a policy around extended COVID leave, very similar to what we termed FFCRA last year, which is Family First COVID Relief Act, where the state of Delaware provided 14 days of COVID leave to state employees should they be immediately impacted in terms of COVID or their care for a family member with COVID. The state after releasing that memo, kind of backpedaled a bit in terms of does it need to be a policy or doesn't it? They are in the process of writing an FAQ to give districts deeper detail on exactly what the requirements would be around that. That FAQ was due to come out last week, but it's been delayed. Fortunately, you've heard some commentary tonight on how fortunate the district is to have leads between Ken Hudson, Dr. Lawson with her presentation. Same holds true with Dr. Jason Hale. He is an immediate go-to in the state on anything and everything that's related to finance and running of a district. And he has been involved since that memo came out in some of those discussions and can provide us a little deeper detail. And we believe that we have a path forward. We hope that it's not a policy, because just like we were discussing that how to proceed with board meetings, when you write that policy, it could be a 2, 3, 4 month process between the time you write it, you get a first read, revisions, drafts. It could be 3 or 4 months down the road. We've got teachers who are in the midst of dealing with COVID and family members with COVID, and we need an immediate path forward on this. And part of that presentation tonight will be a recommendation for us to move forward in the same way that we handled COVID leave requests last year. I think we had a wonderful approach. There was a 4-person team who met, reviewed each employee's request. That team consisted of Dr. Hale, our lead nurse, coordinator of school health, Beth Maddie, Delethea McIntyre, our director of human resources, and another member from the district office extended leave department. That person has retired and is now being replaced with Angie Thomas, who is a valued member of our business office, who knows the ins and outs around leaves and all the financial and federal regulations that are involved. That team comes together so that it's not one person making the decision, so that it's a fair and balanced approach. They weigh the incident against ADA to make sure that there's no ADA claim. If there is, it follows a different path. And again, a very structured, methodical, timely process that we would like to say that we're moving forward with as we did last year. Then once that FAQ comes out, again, we'll take that FAQ, compare our current practice to what's in that FAQ. If we need to make any adjustments, we can do that. But that way we can start to offer that relief to our employees as soon as possible. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hale.
Yes, thank you. And I'm certainly available to ask or answer any questions you may have. So we do not have any formalized documentation from the state as of yet. Basically, where we are at this point is that the Office of Management and Budget has provided districts the opportunity to allow for up to 10 days of COVID leave. And in layman's terms, this would essentially be like having 10 sick days that do not get charged against your individual allotment of sick days. So what the Office of Management and Budget is asking is for districts to work through a process that is approved by the board or get approval from the board to work through a process and or develop a process. Now for us, we have followed the Delaware code each year that we've gone through this. And really the idea is, if an individual would be charged a sick day, in this instance, they would be afforded one of these 10 days. So as we go through the process currently with Beth Maddie and her team making the determination on whether someone is able to be on site, if those individuals are unable to work, then they would be qualified for these 10 days. So really the process would be the same as we've handled really any other instance in the past. So having a specialized process just for this honestly is not necessary because we have an existing process in place for our sick time tracking and all of our leave process. So what we're asking from the board is for us to have the authority to move forward with allowing the utilization of these 10 days in accordance with the process that we have followed since the beginning of COVID. So I'm certainly available to, answer any question you may have as it relates to the process, but that is a requirement of the Office of Management Budget that the board essentially give the thumbs up to allow us to move forward in doing this. All of the recoding and all of how it's coded within the system is something that we handle in the business office.
Dr. Hale, can you provide the retroactive dates?
Sure. So what we're looking for is for all of our 12-month employees, we're hoping to allow for us going back to July 1st. And then for all of those teachers and paraeducators and those that start the quote unquote school year, we would go to the first day of the school year. So the first teacher day would be the first day that we would be able to retroactively go back. So for example, if there are any individuals that have qualified for this prior to the approval, we would go back and do the necessary recoding to give those days back to those employees.
And Dr. Hale, that wouldn't be first teacher day with students, but it would be first.
It would be the first
report
contractual day, the first contractual day for each of those.
So it'd be first in service day.
Yes.
So explain to me how the current sick, do you start with a sick day bank at the beginning of the first teacher day? And so I guess first off, this is not an action item for tonight. It's just a discussion item, given that there are so many outstanding questions with OMB that the district's trying to get answered. But I guess, so my question is, how does the sick time work now? And as we wait for this clarification on the FAQs, is there any disadvantage or burden upon our employees today? Like, do they start with a sick bank that can be used and then coded after this is all clarified?
Sure. I guess ideally, as it relates to the process moving forward, the sooner that we can obtain approval from the board to move forward with this process, the better. If we are able to get action this evening, that's certainly something that we could continue to move forward with our existing process. The way that our sick time works for all of our employees, if you are a 10-month employee, let's say a teacher, for example, they are given 10 days of leave at the beginning of the year. So it's a front-loaded 10 days that starts on the first day. And then a qualified absence would allow them to utilize one of those days. Any unused days then carry forward into the future. So for example, if you go 10 years without using any days, you would have a bank of 100 days. So in the instances of the individuals that have been charged sick time up to this point, we would go back and basically give them that sick day back. So the individual would be paid as they would normally, what we would call their regular pay, and they would not be charged a sick day.
So just a point of clarification, Mr. President. We're not seeking any action tonight, and should that FAQ come back saying the district should have a policy in place, then we'll have to come back to you. Our intent was just to move forward with the process that we've always used until we see that FAQ. Should something in that FAQ force us to come back for a policy, we'll do that. But our intent was just, we didn't come to you for approval a year and a half ago when FFCRA first came in, because it already met our existing practice.
Right, so that's what I'm hearing. So if we can apply to this the way we applied it earlier in the year, then I think that's the direction we should and can go. But if it does require a policy, then we need to get the information on the FAQs and the clarifications from OMB on some of that application.
And so the current document itself does not require a policy, but does require the board to approve the districts to move forward with the allowance of the 10 days, if that makes sense. So it's not a formalized policy that's required, but in order to utilize the days, the district would require, or the state would require the districts to have approval of their boards to move forward with allowing for the utilization of the 10 days.
Right. So I think if it required the policy, I'm sure the board would make a motion and vote on that. But absent of that requirement at this time, I know I would certainly want to make sure that if the state is offering 10 days of COVID leave, that I don't see any reason why we would not offer that if the state is paying
Right.
that money, and we can do it with a process that was in place last year. Is that correct?
So basically what the Director of Office of Management and Budget is saying is that the only way that we can utilize those days and or submit anything as it relates to reimbursement is if the board takes action to allow us to do that. So it's not a policy, it's the board making a motion to allow the district to utilize the 10 days. So I know that it's a bit confusing, but it's not a formalized policy that's required. It is just the board saying we will allow these 10 days to be utilized.
Mr. President, can we make a motion
We
to
have to come
approve?
back for an emergency meeting to vote on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to make that motion tonight, but it's not being listed as an action item. Can we do that? I don't think we
We
can.
shouldn't. It's listed as a discussion item. And the impression that Dr. Marinucci had given the boards at the DSBA meeting was that the state would be providing guidance on this.
So the state is providing, as it relates to these FAQs, we can certainly, as they become available, we can bring them back and at the next board meeting, go through the process. I do see on there that it's discussion item and not an action item. So, we can bring the FAQs to your attention as soon as we get them. We've seen various drafts of them that have not been yet made public. And really the idea with the FAQ is to more so clarify some of the points such as this, which was, the letter in itself was quite confusing that came out initially. So the FAQs are really being used to clarify the memo as it relates to things like whether a policy is necessary and or the authority of the board as it relates to allowing for these days. So once that becomes available, I can provide information to the board. And then when we come back in October, I'm more than happy to discuss those. And then we can go from there.
I think anything we can do to expedite the process for our employees who are in the process, in the throes of taking care of somebody with COVID or in quarantine themselves. It is a stressful time right now. And I mean, I would just, anything that we can do, if we can't do it tonight, I understand we can't do anything tonight, but I would really like to give the employees of our district some assurance if we can, but if it's just verbal, then.
And I can assure you that we're able to go back. So certainly that's something that, coming back to you in October and getting approval, we will be able to go back and make the necessary adjustments once that happens.
Yeah, I mean, after all, you're going back for the 12-month employees already to July 1st.
We would do that once we get approval, yes.
So Dr. Hale, one more time, I'm sorry.
No.
If the original LMB memorandum said that boards needed to approve a policy, but now we're saying that we don't necessarily need a policy, we can do what districts can do what they did in the beginning of COVID, then what document from LMB is asking us to tell the district as a board to go do what you did last year?
Right. So the clarification that's coming in, and again, this is part of the reason why, we had asked to be a little bit more involved on the front end of this, that the clarification FAQs that are coming out will provide that guidance, but the way that it has been explained to us through not only the Department of Ed, but also members of the Office of Management and Budget, is that a formalized policy is not necessary. So that will be clearly stated within the FAQ that's coming out. That will be issued by the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. So when that information becomes available, I'll be sure to get that to everyone. But we have had the conversation, and I know that that's That is what the document will say as it relates to policy.
So if we can't vote on it tonight because it
Right.
wasn't listed as action item,
So by next
does that
month,
leave
we'll-
any of our employees in limbo until we
So,
meet
I mean,
again?
So really what we would do at that point, I mean, certainly we won't penalize employees. I mean, individuals that are utilizing their front-loaded sick time and or banked sick time, we would just be recoding that back and giving those days back to them once we receive approval on this.
And Dr. Hell, would they be getting some kind of like email notification?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, once the information is known, we'll be communicating this to everyone.
So would your recommendation be to put this on the October agenda?
Yes.
Or have a special meeting to approve, make an action? If we can do it in October and it doesn't put any of our employees in harm's way, then I would say let's do that.
I can assure you that we won't penalize employees.
Let's make a special agenda item.
What's that?
I think we should add it as have a special meeting to come back. Even if we don't have the FAQs back, we can vote to support the district in supporting our staff through COVID.
But that's the impression I'm getting. They're doing that anyway without a special meeting.
Right, we'll follow the same process, then that employee will know whether or not they would qualify for those 10 days, should the FAQ allow that. That's the part of the, I guess, the danger on this is being leery of moving forward with any kind of policy when you don't even see the FAQ. Who knows what's in that thing, right? And that's why we kind of said, well, we'll just move forward with what we've done until we've got to see that FAQ. Good that Dr. Hale is on that committee reviewing it, but we've seen it before until it's handed to us in writing and signed off on. That's what's needed to be said.
The maximum amount of time an individual would have afforded to them by this is equal to the amount of leave that would be front loaded. So we would not have any employees that would be in a situation where they would be penalized in any way that would not give us enough time to go back and to make sure that they're credited with the appropriate number of days.
All right, well, let's do that. We'll add it to the October agenda and you guys proceed just as Superintendent Holler declared they would. Any other comments from the board? Okay. Dr. Hale, stay by the mic. You're up with the monthly financial report for July and August, financial position report. And maybe we'll vote on those three items together if it pleases the board.
All right.
And then we'll hear on the disabled veterans property tax credit.
All right, if everyone can see my screen there. This is the information for the July 31st monthly report. I'll quickly go through this as well as the August report. And certainly if there's any questions, please let me know. The first month of the year is usually one that provides not a whole lot of activity. You can see that we did get our front-loaded state funds, which, and you can see in each of the columns how much was awarded. A total of $113 million was received. On the local funds, you can see very few, roughly 0.2%. July is the month where we typically receive the lowest amount of our tax dollars, with the months of September and October being the two largest, where we receive a bulk, probably about 90% of our tax dollars come in those months. So the revenue on the local side, as you can see, is relatively low. We have received final approval on our consolidated grant, so those funds, we will begin to see those over the course of the next month or two as the Department of Education processes them. On the expense side, the system comes up usually about the 9th or 10th of July for us to begin transactions. So you can see here for the month of July, the expenditures that have taken place. So this is a typical month of July. You can see the number of encumbrances and expenditures, and that certainly within the next report, you'll see that picks up considerably. We always look at our comparison of the number of pay cycles compared to the amount of expense, and you can see roughly 3 of our 26 pay cycles is equivalent to about 11.5%. You can see here that we're running in that first month about 12.2. That number will smooth out over the course of the first couple months of the year, as we do have additional payroll expenses for summer school in the month of July. Our prior year expenditure report, these are all of the encumbrances that are related to appropriations at the end of fiscal year 21, as well as any expenditures that would take place from appropriations given to us from the state that are 21 or earlier. Our cash flow for the month, we have projected at the end of the fiscal year to have a carry forward balance of roughly $10.4 million. And that remains unchanged in the month of July. So would you like me to move forward to the August report, or do you want to approve these individually?
We could group C, D, and E together.
Okay. Moving on to the August 31st report. In total, we've received over 100% of our projected revenue, and I do want to make note that we did indicate here, and we will make the adjustment in the final budget, that we did receive the full $25 million from the bond bill. That is something that when we went through the preliminary budget process, we weren't certain as of yet as to how that was coming in, but we will make the necessary adjustments once we complete the unit count and do our final budget. You can see for the month of August, we received roughly, or through August, $1.4 million, which is about 2.5%. We will see that continue to climb over the course of the next several months. And again, waiting on that October amount, which is the bulk of our funds. Similar to that of our federal funds, but I also want to indicate here that we've received the full amounts of ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, which is roughly $36 million. So that has been indicated in our revenue section as well. Expenditures, this is a pretty typical month of August for us, as the buildings and departments are going through the process of getting ready for the beginning of the school year. So all of our budgets are looking to be in good shape. You can see that we do have a specific budget line for our ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds, and you'll see in a moment that we have a special report for that as well. Our salary expenditures were at roughly 19.2%, which would be 5 out of the 26 pay cycles. And you can see that we're running currently at 20.3. Again, those will continue to smooth out over the course of the next several months. So that's typical for where we would normally be at this time of year. As we have in the prior report, this is our prior year expenditure report. So these are all of the encumbrances and expenditures for those appropriations that are prior to fiscal year 2021. And then you can see here that we have a new report that is listing the expenditures related to ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. So the total amount of these expenditures is being reported also on the expenditure page, and those numbers should tie in directly to what you see on the prior. So you can see that we have budgeted each of these areas very specifically to provide each of those individual areas to have the ability to track their funds that have been budgeted within ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. So what you see here ties directly to the approved application that was submitted and approved by the Department of Education. So this information over the course of the months to come, over the next 3 years, will continue to reflect the areas where those expenditures are taking place. And certainly if there are any other information or reports that you'd like to see, I can provide you really with any level of detail that you would like to see on those expenditures. Moving forward to our cash flow statement, the amount remains unchanged at $10.4 million. As we get closer to the middle of the years, when we would begin to look whether that projection is higher or lower. But at this point, I feel as if the 10.4 is a good number for a projection for our carry forward for June 30th of 2022. Moving on to our financial position report. This is our quarterly report that we're required to file with the Department of Education to show that we have sufficient funds in our appropriations to carry us through October of the next year. And as you can see on this report, we do have sufficient funds. Are there any questions that I could answer?
Dr. Hale, could you go back to the August report? I think it was
Sure.
page 5, where it had the breakdown, had the ESSER identification on right here.
Yes.
So can you give me that explanation again as to what this breakdown is?
So each of these is called an operating unit on the side here. So these operating units coincide with each of the areas that have been provided with funding per the application. So for example, Carcroft. Carcroft has a building budget that if you come on the first expenditure page, you can see that Carcroft has a budget this year of $85,305. That is their operating budget for fiscal year 2022. The amount of funds that they have been afforded through the ESSER grant, both 2 and 3 for Carcroft is, or was it 57,720. So that's the amount that they have per the applications to spend over the next 3 years. Similar, each of these individual operating units, there is also an operating unit within the operating budget for them. But the reason that we are budgeting it this way is that so that we can provide those budget managers the opportunity to track these funds specifically, so that over the course of the next 3 years, they will know at any given time what their balance is. And we will be going through the process of doing reconciliations, tracking, doing reporting, and any amendments that are necessary through the department will be reflected on these reports moving forward.
So for the public's benefit, just can you kind of touch on what the, having a identification for superintendent, assistant superintendent, like what would fall under those buckets?
So as we look at initiatives and programs, so the one that I would look at that I always like to is facilities, for example. Support services, special education, each of those currently have a budget with an existing budget manager. So you see assistant superintendent 1, assistant superintendent 2. So each of those areas, it coincides with a specific area of responsibility. So in those particular instances, the individuals supervise areas in which, the budget would flow up to them. I'm not sure if that's making sense. So for example, John Reed, $4.7 million, because there's a considerable amount of facilities that are allowed within ESSER as it relates to mechanical systems and air quality and those sorts of things. So he's able to manage this budget separately than that of what he's doing for his operating budget within the year.
Yeah, so when you see superintendent listed as $1.1 million, that doesn't come to me at all. I help oversee safety and security, and that is the bulk of that is security cameras. But because I oversee that, it's listed under.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what some clarification for the public.
And we'll certainly provide additional reporting as we move forward, with this being the first month that we've had these expenditures. As we go through and have conversations with the district finance committee, we could potentially see these reports change to answer questions specifically to what you're asking. So we can modify the reports to really show any level of detail that would be asked for by either the board or the district finance committee.
And over time, I know we in previous meetings had talked about as this money was coming in, superintendent gave a big presentation on the 13 or 15 buckets of where that money is going to go. I just want to make sure as we go down, as the money is encumbered, that it will kind of tie in for those buckets and, continue with our transparency as
it has to, and that's something that we will have to provide reporting to the Department of Ed, and they will be checking 100%. They will be checking.
Okay.
Yeah, and President Squirrel, I'm glad you pointed this out, because Angie Thomas has masterminded this reporting system along with Dr. Hale, and it's totally so that you can drill down and see exactly what's getting spent and where. It requires quite a bit of extra work on Angie's behalf, but again, we're going to be faithful stewards and fully transparent on how that money is spent.
Any additional comments or questions from the board? With that, I will entertain a motion to approve the monthly financial report for July the monthly financial report for August, and the financial position report subject to audit.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, and did I hear a second? You, Ms. Gordon?
A couple people second, yeah.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Leads us to the Disabled Veterans Property Tax Credit. Dr. Hill.
Yes, House Bill 214 was passed on June 30th by the General Assembly, and it provides for a tax credit for eligible disabled veterans. This tax credit is very similar to that of what we currently refer to as the senior tax credit. And the concept here is that any eligible disabled veteran would be 100% of their taxes would be waived by the state. Now, what happens for the district is any of those funds that are waived would be reimbursed to us by the state. So there is no effect on the district in total as it relates to the revenue of the district, similar to that of the senior tax credit. Currently, the senior tax credit has an amount, I believe, up to $500. An individual that is a disabled veteran and also qualifies for the senior tax credit can only get one or the other, whichever is the higher amount of the two. It would not be eligible for both. So in almost every instance, the disabled veteran credit is going to be the higher credit. So what will happen is very similar to that of the senior tax credit. Twice a year, they will go through a reconciliation process at the state, and they will then forward us any funds that were credited to those taxpayers will be given to us. So this is something that does require, because the legislation cannot impose on the board to provide a credit. So this happened very similar back in, I want to believe it was 2000 and I'm going to say 11 or so, when the senior tax credit, the boards had to approve the allowability of the senior tax credit. So what we're asking for tonight is for the board to approve the disabled veterans tax credit. And again, the net impact on the district's revenue is zero, because any funds credited to the disabled taxpayer will be given to the district directly from the state.
Move to approve.
So move.
Motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Ackerman, motion, Reverend Perry, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Hale.
Thank you.
That leads us to general information and meeting dates. Next board meeting is October 18th, followed by November 15th and December 13th. Do apologize for the public. I know we've been bouncing around with Mount Pleasant Elementary, Brandywine High School, and we even had I think a Claymont Elementary in there. October meeting will be back here at Brandywine. I think for the foreseeable future, this room gives us the most space. So certainly for October, we will be here. November and December are to be determined, but I would likely say they will most likely be here at Brandywine. So thank you everyone for your time and participation this evening. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, to hear a second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.